I never thought loneliness could lead me down a path I wasn't prepared for. My marriage had lost its warmth. My husband, always busy, always distant, treated me more like a roommate than a partner. Nights felt empty. Conversations became routine, and emotional closeness had turned into a distant memory. I told myself it was normal, that this was just what happens after years together. But deep down, I craved attention, connection, something to remind me I was still alive. Then there was him, my stepson. Kind, observant, and far more perceptive than I had realized. At first it was nothing, just little moments where I felt acknowledged in ways my husband no longer seemed to manage. I ignored it, convincing myself it was just in my head. But the more I tried to dismiss it, the more it lingered. The way his gaze rested a second too long. The way he was always nearby, casually present, as though sensing something unspoken. One evening, after another silent dinner with my husband, I went to my room. The loneliness had become heavy. I needed a moment of peace, of release, even if just in my mind. The house was quiet. My husband had gone to bed early, and I assumed my stepson was in his room, likely busy with his own world. I closed my eyes, letting my thoughts drift. I was trying to breathe, to calm the storm inside me. I didn't hear the door open. By the time I noticed, it was too late. I froze. My stepson stood there, expression unreadable, perhaps confused, perhaps surprised. The silence was long and tense. My heart pounded from shock and unease. I grabbed a nearby blanket, covering myself with embarrassment, but the moment had already happened. He didn't move, didn't look away right away. My voice barely came out. "You shouldn't be here." He tilted his head slightly, lips curled in a strange expression. I didn't mean to interrupt. His tone was too calm. I had expected surprise, discomfort, but instead, it was measured and steady. It made me uneasy. "Go," I whispered. He hesitated, his eyes not leaving mine. Then slowly, he turned and shut the door behind him. I sat there in silence, heart racing. What had just happened? And why, despite the embarrassment, did part of me still feel shaken in a way I hadn't in years? I lay awake for hours, replaying the moment. The next morning, I avoided him. I couldn't even look at him without remembering everything. My husband sat across from me at breakfast, casually scrolling through his phone, oblivious. If he had any idea what had taken place, or what his son had witnessed, it would break everything. I sipped my coffee to steady myself, but I could feel my stepson's gaze. He wasn't avoiding me. If anything, his eyes followed me more closely. Every glance, every shift in his seat felt purposeful. He was waiting, watching, seeing what I would do. "Everything okay?" my husband asked, glancing up briefly. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just didn't sleep well." My stepson let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh, just enough to unsettle me. He remembered. And now I couldn't forget. The rest of the day, I tried to keep my distance, but it was like trying to escape air. He always seemed to be nearby, reaching for something at the same time as me, brushing by in the hallway. Casual but not. There was a quiet charge in every shared space. That night, as I cleaned up the kitchen, he leaned against the counter watching. I kept my focus on the dishes, though my hands trembled. "You don't have to act so nervous," he said lightly. I tried to sound indifferent. "I don't know what you mean." He smirked. "Last night." My breath caught. I turned to face him, trying to stay composed. But the look in his eyes shook me. He wasn't awkward. He wasn't apologetic. He was curious. I swallowed. That was a mistake. He took a small step closer. Was it? I should have ended it right there. Closed the door on this growing tension. But I didn't. I stayed frozen in the moment. He reached for a glass from the cabinet, his arm brushing mine. A small touch. But it stayed with me. I clenched my hands. This can't happen. He didn't step back. "Then why aren't you walking away?" I didn't answer. because the truth was I didn't want to. For the first time in years, I felt like someone truly noticed me, and it unsettled me deeply. Then my husband's voice called out from the other room. "Babe, you coming to bed?" Reality returned with force. I stepped away from the counter, trying to restore space and control. My stepson just watched, eyes shadowed with thoughts I couldn't read. I walked away, but I still felt his eyes long after I left the room. The next few days were tense. Being around him felt like balancing on a wire. He wasn't awkward or apologetic. In fact, he acted more self-assured, like someone who already knew too much. My husband stayed busy, unaware, while I struggled to keep everything in balance. Then came the announcement. My husband had to go out of town for a couple of days. I acted indifferent, but inside I felt something shift. And I saw it in my stepson's eyes. He noticed it too. We both knew there were fewer boundaries now. That night, I sat on the couch, pretending to watch a movie. But I couldn't focus. I heard him come in and sit next to me, not across, not at a distance, but right beside me. Close. Closer than necessary. "Still pretending nothing's happening?" he asked, his voice soft. "This isn't a game," I replied quietly. "Then stop acting like it is," he said, his arm brushing mine again. I didn't pull away. I should have. I knew I should, but I didn't. His fingers traced the side of my hand, gentle and slow. I turned to face him. The room felt impossibly still. "This is wrong," I whispered. He held my gaze. "Then why does it feel right?" I had no words. Every defense I had was falling apart. And as he reached for my hand again, I didn't move. My thoughts spiraled. It wasn't about romance. It wasn't even about him. It was about the part of me that had been numb for years, now finally waking up. Somewhere deep inside, I wanted to pull away, but I didn't. The fire had already been lit. Later, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, reality settled in. What had happened was deeply complicated. I had crossed a line. But the strangest part of it all? I didn't feel regret. Not in the way I expected. Morning came too quickly. I woke, heart racing, thoughts tangled. I looked at him, still asleep, at peace. And I felt torn. I gathered my things quietly, returning to the life I was expected to live. At breakfast, he was calm, confident, like someone who had nothing to hide. I tried to act normal, but he didn't. He watched me with the kind of look that said everything without a single word. Later that morning, my husband called. He spoke about his trip, about work. Everything sounded so normal, so ordinary. I answered like nothing had changed. But everything had. When I hung up, my stepson stood in the doorway. "You're thinking too much," he said. I crossed my arms. "Because this isn't normal." "Maybe not," he shrugged, but it happened. "It can't happen again." He stepped closer. "You sure?" I wasn't. And that was the real problem. The rest of the day, I stayed away from him as much as I could. But inside, something had shifted. Something I couldn't ignore. Every touch lingered in my memory. Every glance made my heart race. That night, my husband came home. He kissed me, told me he missed me. I smiled, pretending. My stepson stood behind him, meeting my eyes for a second too long. There was a secret between us now. A line had been crossed. I had two choices: bury it deep and live with the weight of it, or risk losing everything. And in that moment, as my husband pulled me close, and my stepson brushed past me with just the faintest touch, I realized something terrible and true. I had already made my choice.